Good evening, everybody, and welcome to I was going to say a Rangers review special. I was kind of hoping I wouldn't be called on for this show this Sunday evening, but here we are. It's because Rangers have suffered a Scottish Cup humiliation at the hands of Championship side, mid-table Championship side, Queen's Park at Ibrox, going out of the Scottish Cup. It's Rangers' first defeat to Queen's Park since 1882 and first ever home defeat to a lower division side in this competition. You have to go way back. Probably the most infamous defeat was Berwick Rangers back in January of 1967 for the last time Rangers suffered a defeat of this magnitude in this competition. It was absolutely galling stuff. Rangers 0-0 at half-time. They never turned up. Seb Droyst fires Queen's Park ahead with about 20 minutes to go. Rangers huffed and puffed, dominated possession, but they just couldn't find a way through. Callum Ferry, the Queen's Park goalkeeper, had the game of his life, saved a last gasp penalty. Rangers awarded a penalty on the stroke of the 90th minute. James Tavernier missed, and the game finished 1-0 to Queen's Park. And Rangers' domestic season, you've got to say, is over. And we've only just entered February. Jonny McFarlane joins us to dissect what has unfolded at Ibrox and what the future now holds for the Rangers manager. Jonny, how are we doing?
Yeah, well, Derek, I was hoping I would be on and I'd be able to take the mick out of you about your daft holidays to these far-flung frozen climes, but I think we've got other things to talk about tonight. Yeah, a terrible, terrible result, Derek, but a performance perhaps that no one will be that surprised about, given it was up against a domestic opposition that was stuffy, that was well organised, that sat in a deep low block, that invited high balls into the box, that invited set pieces. Rangers aren't good at dealing with either of these things. And scored on their only foray up the park, and they made it count. Rangers were wasteful. They were lacking invention, lacking guile, lacking pace, lacking purpose, lacking invention, lacking tempo. And ultimately, while they created chances in the last 5 minutes or 10 minutes of the game, it doesn't excuse the fact that the first 80-odd minutes of the game were just diabolical and more of what we've seen. I find it so hard to judge this manager based on this schizophrenic approach to games. You've got him performing brilliantly with the team against Spurs, going to Old Trafford and valiant showing. Cup final against Celtic, deserved to win. 3-0 win against Celtic at home in recent months. From that to this, the gap in performance level, this up and down sensibility that seems to come from the very top. It's hard to fathom, Derek. It's hard to get your head around. But I think there is no way back for this manager, given the situation that is unfolding in front of us. 10 points in the league is one thing. Cup final, as we've talked about, I think we can say that the manager probably doesn't deserve too much criticism for that. At the end of the day, it's penalties. It's a decision that should have been made by the VAR that wasn't made. That one we can put to one side, but in the league, it's been nowhere near good enough. In the cup, it's nowhere near good enough. And it's these same issues over and over and over again. Time after time after time, Rangers struggle to break down a low defensive block. And we're not talking about a great side in the Championship here, Derek. They're, as you say, sitting in 5th place, conceded 26 goals this season. It's not like they have a brilliant defensive record that's standing out. You know, Livingston got a better defensive record. Ayr got a better defensive record. Falkirk got a better defensive record. Morton have got a better defensive record. You know, this is not a standout team in the Championship, but they're able to sit back, Derek. They're able to go deep. Yep. And we know that if you do that, Rangers struggle. And that's what we saw again tonight. It's really, really difficult.
Yeah, it is difficult. And Callum Davidson, of course, coming back to haunt Rangers. If you remember St Johnstone's side knocked Rangers out of the cup when Rangers won the league title under Stephen Gerrard, and he's come back and done the business with a Queen's Park team that, I mean, no disrespect to them, but Rangers should be beating teams like that. I guess a lot of comments coming in saying this is on the players, Johnny, and I totally get that. I mean, as a fan, I sort of was looking at it, just expecting Rangers to turn up and swat Queen's Park away, given the upturn in form, given the difference in the divisions. Perhaps the players have got that in their heads as well. But is that solely on the players? Does the manager have to sort of...
No, it's not solely
in them that they can't just turn up and beat teams like that?
I'm not having that, Derek. Listen, it's on the manager to organise the set pieces, because the manager didn't want to give that up to a set piece coach, which is what most elite clubs do. He didn't want to do that because he wanted to take care of himself. Unfortunately, Rangers are terrible, diabolical at set pieces. Guys, I don't know if you're aware of this stat. Rangers had 16 corners today. 16 corners. You know, it's one thing having 28, 29, 30 shots. Different stats companies have different numbers for those. The numbers that I've got at the moment are 28. Clement said 30. Doesn't really matter. The point is 16 corners. Did Rangers really look like scoring from many of those? Nowhere near good enough at set plays. This is Scottish football. Scottish football games are decided on set plays. You need to be strong in these scenarios, and Rangers are extremely weak. That's not on the player. That's the players. That's on the manager. That's the manager's compartment. That's what he does. He deals with that section of the team. He said it openly in press conferences. And it's very poor.
Johnny. Did you not ask him about it? You asked
I
did,
him yeah, I did. Now, to be fair, it's a while back. I can't remember if it was the start of this season or the.
There's been no improvement since then. If anything, they're worse.
Yeah, it's nowhere near good enough. And the quality of chances that Rangers created on the night towards the end got better, Derek. There's no doubt about that. You've got the penalty. Dessers is put clean through. Another one of those Dessers moments, isn't it? You need him. I think he's got to score there.
He's good save.
There's a great save at the end from the headers. I think it's proper, is it? Whoever it is that gets the header on at the end. So there's some good chances towards the end. But up to that point, there's no chances to speak of. I was chatting on the phone with Josh before I came on, and he's saying, "Well, what did they actually create?" Because I was talking about Callum Ferry having a great game, and he's got a point. You know, was there many one-on-ones? Well, you know,
that probably that Dessers chance you talked about late on was a decent little move where Egeman played him in, but that aside, there was very little. You're right about set pieces; they are pathetic. They really are bad for a team of this caliber. You'd expect a lot more. I see lower division clubs with much more invention in their set pieces, and Rangers are able to produce, and they're susceptible to set pieces as well. They don't do anywhere near enough work on them, it's cost them again. Like you say, 16 corners is a joke. It really is. And they did not look like scoring today. When Queen's Park scored, I had that sort of resignation feel to it, even though Rangers sort of upped the ante somewhat, as you would expect them to do, as they chased an equaliser. They never had that feel that they were going to go on and get an equaliser, despite even when the referee pointed to the spots right at the death, there was that bit of a delay before James Tavernier stepped up. Even then, you just had that feeling that it just wasn't going to be Rangers' day, and it proved to be the case. Very angry reaction at the end, as you would expect, and of course outside the front door as well, as you would expect. Also, I know the manager was asked in his press conference. I had a watch of it. Interesting stuff. Now, no manager is going to, if he's asked if he's going to resign, is going to say yes. And managers don't resign in the modern game. They might come to a leave by mutual consent arrangement with whatever board they work for. Whether Rangers can come to some sort of agreement with the manager and see him on his way, who knows? Interestingly, was asked, will you consider your position? Fans are already asking for your resignation. No, totally not. As in press, do you understand why they'll ask your resignation? There's very little credit in the bank domestically. We know, again, we had these talks in the last couple of months about building up something new. a few weeks ago or the last few weeks, everybody says yes. Everybody sees the evolution this club is making. So again, out of the emotion, taking decisions and turning everything around, I don't think this is what the club needs. And then quizzed, but you must know the fans aren't on your side. I understand that the fans are in emotions now. I know a lot of fans were on my side 3 hours ago. I know that. So now are the emotions of this game. And I totally understand that, because I'm also angry and frustrated about that, about this result in going out of the cup, because it was one of our big goals and our shortest chance to go and win a trophy this season. We all know that. That's probably also one of the reasons that the team was nervous in the second half, because they wanted that so much, because they know how important it is for the club. I know English isn't his primary language, Johnny, but that sort of line there isn't going to wash with supporters. Rangers have went out because they wanted it so much. Perhaps he means they were a tad desperate in rushing things. But what do you make of his press conference there? Quite interesting, some of the stuff that he said. He was asked at the end of it whether this is as low as he's ever felt in Glasgow. I'm not low. I'm very frustrated. I'm ambitious to get results back. I'm very frustrated about this result today, yes, but I'm not low. What do you make of his press conference?
Well, he's talking about how, everyone was talking about the players and the development, and of course that's true. And listen, by the way, I still stand by what I've been saying until recently. I think there's been some excellent signings being brought into the club, but the question is not whether or not he's been part of the work at the club that's been good. I don't think there's any doubt that's been the case. Niels Coppin's obviously heavily been involved in the recruitment side, and Philip Clement will have okayed all these players coming in. There's no doubt Igamani's a good player, Jeffty's a good player, despite the fact he has brain farts like today. That was just inexplicably bad defending for the goal, really, really poor. And he won't get a move unless he gets on top of that. That was shocking. And I actually think Jeffty, they might want to think about moving Ridvan back and pushing Jeffty forward, where he's less exposed to that kind of thing.
Right. Played in Cyprus, yep. But
if you look at some of these players that have come in, I think there's been development and there's young players there, and there's something to work with. The question is not whether or not that's true or not. The question is whether Philip Clement is the man to get the best out of these players. Listen, I don't think Clement's a bad manager. I don't. I think the European results show that. The question is actually is he in the right movie? Is Rangers the right club for him? Is he a low block specialist? Because, listen, 34 out of the 38 games in Scotland, you're going to be pretty much up against that. So you need a manager that's able to create, able to empower those players who can make a difference in the final third of the pitch, who can build these, as he says, automatisms in terms of getting the guys so that they can have that creative spark between themselves. They know where they're going to be in any given moment. They know how to attack space. I don't think he's the man to do that. I've not seen any evidence, Derek, that this is a guy that over 38 games in a Scottish league is going to win you enough games to take you over the line. And listen, you can. We've seen this movie before. Someone in the comments very, very, very astutely said it's Le Guen all over again.
Yeah,
and it kind of is. Le Guen was a good manager. He'd done well in previous jobs. Like Clement, he'd won 3 titles in a better league. But the fact is, Scotland's quite a unique league and requires quite unique skills. And I'm not sure Philip Clement's style, Philip Clement's way of playing is going to be successful. In fact, I'd go further in saying I'm not sure. I'm certain it's not going to be successful against the Brendan Rodgers side over 38 games. So for me, what Rangers have to do and what they have to show is that the club are moving on and they're going to make some ruthless decisions. Now, there needs to be an alternative option in place, but I do not think this manager can possibly survive regardless. Philip Clement is not going to be the Rangers manager into next season unless they do something truly remarkable.
Unless he wins the Europa League.
Beats Celtic.
I mean, that's unrealistic.
Both games, gets to the Europa League final. or wins Europa League. That's what we're talking about now. There would have to be a level of move forward from where we're at right now, and cutting out this type of result completely between now and the end of the season. But I just don't see that happening. I don't think anyone else sees that happening, Derek. The problem is, what's the alternative? I don't have an alternative to hand. I think you need somebody who would come in, continue to develop these young players so that there isn't a break in the momentum that we've seen in the likes of Hamza Eggman, because you need him to be... You can't write off half a season with him. He needs to continue this acceleration that we've seen. So, undoubtedly, it's a big one for Patrick Stewart, and he's got to stand tall and show the leadership he's getting paid to show, and make a call here. The problem for Patrick Stewart, if, as I suspect will happen, Rangers decide to leave Philippe Clement in position until the end of the season, I think very, very quickly the Rangers fans are going to turn their ire away from Philippe Clement and onto this new regime of Fraser Thornton and Patrick Stewart, because people will see it as an extension of the previous boards. They'll start to question who's in charge. They'll talk about they're only doing what they're told from above. And that might be nonsense. And certainly we understand that Patrick Stewart has got executive power to lead the club. But people will find the decision to keep Philippe Clement in place inexplicable after this result. And let's not sugarcoat it, Derek. I was talking to Josh, as I said, before I came on, and we were saying, like, what result in modern history has even come close? And the only thing that could come close to this is Progress Niederkorn, right? And there's no point in sitting here nitpicking about what's worse, this or Progress Niederkorn.
It feels like that.
Absolutely diabolical. The point is that we are talking about a cataclysmically bad result. And there needs to be, I think, a show of leadership, a show of standards at Rangers. Otherwise, I think what you're going to see is an extremely disillusioned fan base between now and the end of the season. And if I was the board, I'd be pretty concerned about the uptake on season tickets for next, and things like merchandise, sales around Ibrox, and all the rest of it, because I just don't see a fan base that's willing to back the manager anymore. And you can see that on social media. Yeah. Everywhere you look, there's serious anger, and I don't think that's going to go away or dissipate or slide off into the night anytime soon. I think it's going to be something that will retain now.
Lawrence with a point says 3 trophies out of possible 42. The problem is there long before Clement. Celtic eschewing to win another domestic treble. This is my issue with that as well. They never won a treble when Rangers were out of the top flight. Since they've returned, they've won 5 trebles and on course to win a 6th treble. That is damning on the hierarchy, Johnny, more than anything else.
Yes, there's no sugarcoating it, Derek. He can't get away from it. Celtic have gotten 2 very good managers for their last, well, I suppose it's the last 3 managers now, because Brendan Rodgers has come back.
See, when Rangers beat Celtic in that Scottish Cup semi, that was probably the worst thing that could have happened, because remember, Ronnie Dyler was in charge. Celtic realised that, we need to get a proper manager in here. They got Brendan Rodgers in, and guess that the rest is history. So, they've got their house in order. But Rangers, we thought they had their house in order when 55 was achieved, but it's all gone clattering back down the way.
Yeah, it's a situation that across the city, they can sell their best player in the January transfer window, completely safe in the knowledge that they're going to win the league, probably by more points already ahead, which is 10, discounting the game in hand, obviously. So that's a level of kind of not arrogance, but confidence in the situation as it stands, that they'd be prepared to sell their best player and not replace him. And sure enough, they send them out to France in comes their left winger to centre forward, and he gets a hat trick against a lower league team in the same division, by the way, and ahead of them, by the way, Queen's Park. I think Wraith Rovers are, I think they're 4th or something like that. But no, actually, they're
expected to beat them.
Yeah, close enough. So that's the level of confidence they have, and Dyson Maeda comes in and scores a hat trick. So they don't need to be at their very best with their very best player. They can afford to do that, and that shows you the gap. But there is no doubt in my mind that there is some green shoots there in terms of the young players that have come in, the young players that are coming through. But they need to have the right coach in the club to bring them on. And the coach that's in there needs to have the right approach. And Derek, I've said this before, and I'll say it again. Too many of Rangers' recent coaches have been these kind of mid-block focused, European-minded managers playing this kind of possession-orientated football, ideally suited for the Europa League if they were sort of playing at a mid-level top 5 league club. Rangers need to have a manager who's going to understand this league and understand that to win it, you have to pulverise teams and you have to go through the pain barrier in December and January and February when the pitches are rubbish, and you need to find a way to win. And it's not about that kind of... It's not just about the football you play. You need to overcome the refereeing in Scotland, where there's a little bit more lenience than there is in European games. We see that all the time. And you need to have the squad and the quality in forward areas and the depth in forward areas to carry you through. So until they do that, until they have a coach that has that mindset, I don't think Rangers are going to challenge. Certainly not under this manager. I don't see it, Derek. Now,
no.
One thing that is absolutely sure, Rangers will need to have another very, very good transfer window in the summer. If they do that, if they have the right philosophy in place at first team level to take on the season ahead next year with the right coach, I don't think there's any reason to be pessimistic about Rangers' long-term hopes. But as it stands, where's the evidence that Philippe Clement is going to be successful in domestic football for Rangers? I'd argue the body of evidence is there that he's not going to be successful. So, I mean, I don't know what your take is on if you look at what we've seen from Clement up till this point domestically. Europe, great. No doubt about it. Brilliant.
No.
But Europe's not important. It doesn't matter. It only matters when you get to the semi-final stage, really.
Thing is, if they never qualified for the Europa League, then he'd be out on his ear, surely. That's the one thing that the board may look at it and go, well, he's doing the business in Europe, but we'll keep him in charge for this moment in time. Is it worthwhile getting rid of him? I don't know if would be a replacement lined up. At big clubs, there should be contingency plans, I would imagine, if things go awry, shall we say, with the current manager. So I would like to think that there is guys on a short list that would call if they made that call to change the manager. But
Derek, I don't think you can bring in another kind of full-time manager at this stage.
Oh, no.
Because the new manager comes in, it's the same cycle, they're under pressure, it's not their squad, it's not built maybe for the type of football they want to play. They go up in the first Old Firm game against Celtic, it's at Parkhead, they lose, they're under pressure. Into the next one, they lose. They say they need to do a rebuild. They go into the next Old Firm game at the start of the season. The rebuild's not kind of firmed up. They lose. And the pressure continues to build and mount. I think you need to start the next season afresh with a new manager. Allow them to have a pre-season. Allow them to bring in the players that they need to bring in to make sure it's their team. And what needs to come in right now, if Philippe Clement's to leave, as I think he should, although I don't think he will, then it needs to be someone that can focus on the development of the talented young players that Rangers have, because what else is there to play for this season? They're going to comfortably come second regardless. The Europa League would be terrific, but do they have the quality to run deep in that tournament without an immense bit of luck? I would say no. So for me, they need to have someone in place that can come in and just focus on the development of the players that Rangers have, so that next season, those young players, the Hamza Gamans, the Jeffries, the Conor Barons, the Bailey Rices, they can be better and significantly better.
Yeah, lots of comments coming in, as you can imagine. A number of comments about the new assistant that came in, Issam Charai. He says, hope the new Moroccan assistant manager was already brought in to take over and the board actually have a plan. He was brought in recently, of course. During this review, he replaced Andres Ilderink, who departed for personal reasons. Interestingly, our Moroccan friends we had on to give us that dossier on Hamza Igaman said that he turned down some head coach jobs because he wanted to take up a serious opportunity elsewhere, and Rangers, of course, was his destination. So that is certainly an interesting one. Was it the former Moroccan under-23 coach? I'm hoping to speak to someone who had him on his podcast to discuss him in more detail this week. So hopefully we'll bring that to you during the week. But could you see that as a potential sort of parting of the ways with Clement and someone like Charai coming in, taking over temporarily, Johnny?
Who knows, Derek? I mean, this is the thing, is I don't think anyone's managed to get very close to Patrick Stewart, and we don't have a track record of the kind of decision-making that he'd take.
Yeah.
So it's very, very difficult to speculate as to what he'll do with any sense of accuracy. But I think one thing that he's shown over and over again, or a few times, to be fair, is that he's gone back and brought people from Manchester United. So is there a link there? Is there a player there, an ex-player that could come in and do that job? You know, the one guy that interests me from a kind of long-term point of view, really, really highly rated in England, is Darren Fletcher. And he's been talked about many, many times in terms of big roles in English football clubs, going to Man City potentially, doing the roles at Manchester United. He's someone that's obviously Scottish. There's a few others that are potential to come in, but you look at the job, for example, that Michael Carrick's done at Middlesbrough. Obviously must have shown something around the place at Manchester United, because he was, again, another one who was involved in the coaching team over the last few years. And then he's gone, and I think he's done a pretty good job down there in the Championship, which is a very, very difficult league. But Middlesbrough are a perennial kind of club that's trying to get back into the Premiership, aren't they? Or the Premier League, sorry. So I think he was someone that did pretty well at the club. Is there another person like that? I don't know. But it's going to be very, very interesting to see what Patrick Stewart does, what his next move is, who he would think would be the options available. Certainly would imagine that Rangers will be thinking outside the box if it comes to a situation where they do sack Philip Clement or they do allow him to move on, because I don't see anyone in Scotland that's up to the challenge of taking Rangers forward. I don't see anyone that would satisfy the fans. I think you're got to be talking about someone who's going to be exciting, someone who's got a brand of football and a philosophy that fits and aligns with what Rangers do 80% of the time, which is the problem with Clement.
Yeah, but never mind philosophies. It has to just be winning football. And there's a comment that came in. JC says we can't win dirty, just win games, Rangers. And I know at home his records is really good. Philip Clement, I think it's one of the best, if not the best, of any Rangers manager. Interestingly, Pedro Caixinha, I've seen a stat that he was one of the best performing Rangers managers away from home. Which is
away from home, his record was absolutely brilliant. It was at home that was a problem for Pedro.
Yeah. Now in charge, of course, of Neymar over at Santos. It's crazy how football works at times, but some comments coming in. I guess it was always going to happen. There's a few posters mentioning Steven Gerrard. Craig Marshall says bring Stevie G home. Of course, recently departed Al Ettifaq. It wasn't quite the happiest of times out there for him in Saudi Arabia.
My big thing with Steven Gerrard, Derek, is that Michael Beale was absolutely key to everything Steven Gerrard did. as his head coach. And Steven Gerrard said as much when he managed to get Michael Beale to Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
And not only that, Gary McAllister, a huge part of it. I think, obviously, Jordan Milsom and Tom Kershaw, they go along for the ride with Steven Gerrard wherever he goes. But would Rangers fans accept Michael Beale back? Would Michael Beale want to come back as an assistant? I don't really see that. I think that's a tricky one. And to me, if you're not getting the whole setup, if you're not getting all those people, you're not getting what you had that took Rangers to 55, and that would be my concern. I think Gerrard, the success of that was very much in the unit, and the unit given the club everything that it needed.
Well, look what's happened to him since he left Rangers, Johnny.
Yeah.
I'd be surprised where he would end up next, really. Who's going to take a chance on him? Because at Villa, he was a disaster.
Do you know what, Derek? I'll defend Steven Gerrard as a coach and as a manager, as a Rangers manager. Because I think, as I've already said, it's quite a specific job. And Gerrard got the leadership figurehead aspect of the job as well as anyone since Walter Smith, and probably before him, Graham Souness. I think even ahead of likes Advocat and McLeish to some extent. And I know McLeish obviously had much more success, but Gerrard as a figurehead I thought was really terrific. Great with the media, great at putting pressure on at the right points, getting his message out there. Those things were especially for a rookie manager, very, very impressive. And while people will say Gerrard's a dud manager, look, he had 1 win in 9, and look at his subsequent career and all that, I think his very specific skills are a great fit for Rangers. Or were a great fit for Rangers.
They need a statesman in there, don't they? Someone that fans can believe in, really. And there's no belief really in this current manager at this moment in time. Well, the lack of belief amongst it, I'd probably say that the vast majority. There are some out there, and I was starting to be won over, I've got to say, with the recent results in Europe. But I think just been brought back crashing down to earth with this pathetic showing today at Ibrox. We're back at square one.
Again, it's down to the schizophrenic nature of Clement's reign, isn't it? Every time you think he's down and out, he bounces back with something. And then, you think back to November, December, Derek, I didn't think there was any chance for him seeing January. But actually, December, there's a lot of impressive football and a big growth in the way the team played and the quality of the team's football. And, we're 9th of February. I think there's been a lot of really, really impressive moments, even this year so far. But you just can't sugarcoat the cataclysmic nature of losing to Queen's Park at Ibrox. It's the first time in the history of Rangers that they've lost to a lower league side at Ibrox in the Scottish Cup. So it's a truly, truly terrible, abysmal result. And people will rightly be furious about it, Derek.
Yeah, now, I brought up the Berwick Rangers result at the top of the show. Remember, infamously, I guess, after that sort of Jim Forrest and George McLean, the two strikers were dropped, transferred within weeks of that game. Rangers actually made the Cup Winners' Cup final that year and never had a recognised striker up front, I believe. It was Bayern Munich they lost 1-0 to. If they had Jim Forrest up there, perhaps things could have been different. Scott Simon was the manager. He wasn't sacked until 10 months after that result, which ended at a 13-year reign. And interestingly, Jock Wallace was in goals for Berwick Rangers in that game. So, the fallout to this one, who knows what's going to happen. But you mentioned there the fan base, the attendances, lots of comments coming in. And Mark Boyle sums up how many are feeling. He says, not going back till PC is gone, had enough. Always didn't expect Ibrox to be full today, Johnny, but there were a lot of spare seats, tickets not being sold for this game. God forbid what the attendances are going to be like from here on in.
Well,
that's something fun.
Derek, the truth is, social media, you shouldn't always take social media as gospel, right?
Yep.
And we've seen examples in recent times when social media was really, really prominently backing the Union Bears, for example, in their walkout, and then the rest of the ground booed that. And if you'd been thinking about social media and what had been said prior to that, you'd have thought that almost probably half the ground would have walked out alongside them. Social media tends to be younger, tends to be more invested, tends to be more kind of aggressive in its outlook towards kind of maybe even towards the ultra movement in terms of its kind of mentality, more what's the word I'm looking for?
It's partisan, isn't it?
Yeah, more partisan. So I think you've got to be careful and not say, well, because I've seen this all on social media, then this seems to be how the Rangers fans are thinking. But Derek, I mean, you and I both know a lot of Rangers fans, and I don't know about you, but my phone has been buzzing since this game ended. And people who are normally very calm and introspective are giving it laldy, and there's a few naughty words being thrown about, to say the least.
Yeah.
So I think it's safe to say people are pretty unhappy and upset, and I suggest that probably goes a little bit deeper than just social media, where unhappiness and upset and tumult tend to be just the everyday.
Yeah. Let's get to some of the comments that are coming in. George Higgins with the point says, Clement is done. Do you think that the board has the ability to choose a successor who can put Rangers on top again, or is the financial position prohibiting that? Like you said, all eyes are on Patrick Stewart in this review that is being carried out at this moment in time, and whether they'll stick by Philippe Clement. He's well and truly well behind the 8 ball here. Whether he can turn this around, I would have my doubts. And we've been on the show before and we've discussed this, and we're back at square one, as I touched on. But that point about finding a successor and whether you would have the belief that Rangers and the hierarchy could do that, I don't think many people would have a great degree of confidence they could, Johnny, just given on the previous appointments.
Well, yeah, to be fair, this is a new broom, isn't it? Patrick Stewart and Fraser Thornton are just in the door, so this would be the first opportunity they had. If you're talking about the previous board, then of course, but these guys are new, and you have to give them the chance to make a decision and show what they're all about. And certainly, as we've said before, Patrick Stewart's got an excellent CV, having been at Manchester United for so long. Seems like a guy with some substance about him. So I think allow him, and I would imagine in conjunction with Niels Koppen as well, given his more all-encompassing role that he's taken on behind the scenes, to try and go out there and find a guy that kind of fits the Rangers criteria. And Derek, I think more and more when we talk about the Rangers criteria, I don't think one man will fit that. You talked about earlier about Steven Gerrard with me, and we were saying about how he had that leadership thing down pat, and you were saying you need someone with that leadership, you need someone with that kind of
gravitas, really.
You mentioned Jock Wallace earlier on, and you think about real strong West of Scotland man leadership, right? And I think there's a bit of that that's going to be needed. But you also need the modern coaching now, don't you? You need someone who's going to coach the players in a way that's going to break down teams that just sit back and defend and fight and claw. So you need someone that's going to empower quality players to go out and play their best and feel free to express themselves. So I think what you need is a management team that kind of understands the game. I think there's going to have to be some clever thinking, because I'm not sure you're going to find this guy, this Jock Wallace reborn type leader who's also a technocrat football coach. I think it's a big ask, and you look at someone like Gio, and I think Gio, looking back, and listen, I called for Gio to go at the time that he went. I think looking back, that was a mistake, I think, but because I think Gio should have been given more time to get his own players in and turn over that squad. But I think the part of the problem is I think it probably would have ended up the same way anyway.
Yeah.
Because as you coined the phrase yourself in that famous show when you sat down with the guy from Feyenoord and talked about the horseshoe, did that ultimately stand the test of kind of Scottish Premiership drudgery. Does that tactical setup get you past Ross County away in the freezing cold when they're fighting and scrapping for their lives, when they're on the telly knowing that somebody could be watching that could get them a next move to somewhere better? And so you think about someone like Gio. He was a World Cup winning World Cup finalist captain. They didn't win; they came second. He was a Champions League winner. He's a Rangers hero. Maybe not quite a legend. Some people would maybe say a legend.
Well, they would have built a statue to him if he won that Europa League.
Of course.
Away from it.
You're completely immortal if you do that. The point is, Gio ticks so many of those boxes and it didn't work out. Then you go for the sort of young coach in Michael Beale, who supposedly understands the club, who has been part of a hugely successful period, and clearly it didn't work. He was given too much power. The fact that the Ross Wilson left, I think Michael Beale at the time was probably quite happy about it, and was quite happy to take on that extra responsibility. But I think in retrospect, we'll look back and say, "Oh, I wasn't ready for that, and I shouldn't have taken that on, and that was a disaster for me."
Yeah.
So you've got two previous managers. I think you need to look back and learn from what happened there, and you also need to look at Philippe Clement. And to me, the big lesson is, if you're going to win the league, you need to win almost every game. You look at the 55 season; they didn't lose a game. Now, that's exceptional. That's probably not going to happen again. But the point is, it's that level of consistency that you need to get close to, especially against the Brendan Rodgers Celtic that don't lose games.
Well, the matches against Celtic, I mean, they're par. If you look at that, it's games against at the bottom side, and we know the away form has just absolutely killed Rangers this season. So he's failed to get that in order. I know that they won it at Tannadice recently. But again, we're harping back to this result, and it just said there's a comment a few minutes ago that says it's sort of 2 steps forward, 1 step forward, 2 steps back, if you like, and that's where we feel we are at the moment. Lots of points coming in, just saying it's not on Clement today. It's the players more than anything else. Robert with the point: stop blaming Clement. These players are not fit to wear the jersey. DJ Sooth says, anyone else feel Bayrami's been posting missing for the last 2 months? He was a big outlay, Johnny, and I think that point there is a valid one. Rangers need more from Nadim Bayrami. I'm failing to see what the recruitment team saw in him to entice him to come to Glasgow. He's simply not doing it.
I think he's shown moments. He's had a couple of key goals, but there's no doubt, if you look at the assists, if you look at the goals, there's not been enough. And if you're going to be a Rangers number 10, you need to get serious numbers racked up. And he's been nowhere near that. That's something that has to be worked on. I do think there's a player there. But as the evidence builds, Derek, I'm starting to rock on whether or not he's got what it takes to be a Rangers success. It's very early to be making judgment calls on him. And I think he's also shown some great things. For example, against Celtic in the last 2 games, finally someone has managed to get hold of Callum McGregor, has managed to stop him dominating Old Firm games. But you look at today, I don't think he offered anything whatsoever today. He doesn't seem to he just doesn't seem to grab a game by the scruff of the neck. Him and Hadji getting in each other's way, those two together, I just don't think that works. So yeah, I think he's got a major 6 months ahead to turn around the narrative, because I can see more and more comments every day racking up about we need to see more from him.
Yeah. There was a comment actually came in just on Hadji. Rob says, I can't believe Clement hooked Hadji today. Absolutely bonkers decision by the manager. Some of the substitutions are bizarre.
It looked like the manager just lost the place a little bit with Hadji. He misplaced a pass, and I think the TV cameras cut to him, and he sort of turned around and signalled to get a sub.
He's done that before. Mine Cantwell get hooked at the Aris Limassol game when they went up the park and scored. He hooked him after that, so he's got a previous for doing that.
He obviously felt that he'd seen it one too many times, and he wasn't getting what he was wanting out of him, and he took him off. Listen, Yanis Hadji, I don't think is ever going to be, a world-class player. He's never going to go and become a £20 million player, for example. But I think He's a clever guy. He's a great guy around the dressing room. He's a very good professional. He gives us all. He's shown time and again he understands the club, and he's a guy who will produce something. If you leave him on, for me, I don't see Rangers losing that game if Hadji had remained on the pitch. I just think he's a guy that will come up with something. He's to me one of the few Rangers players that stands tall and produces when you need him to. And I think that was a poor decision. I would have left Hadji on. Although I do understand why Philip Clement was getting annoyed by some of the loose, sloppy possession that kind of marked that first 60 minutes. It was particularly frustrating. I saw Mo Diamandi had an absolutely terrible one in the second half, where just after the goal, he's got an easy 6-yard pass to make that continues Rangers' forward momentum. They're in Queen's Park's half, and he puts it out of the park. It was just stupid. Robin Propper had a couple of those moments as well. Some of the passing that just wasn't that kind of alacrity, that kind of speed, and that you would expect from a team of Rangers standing and of the type of wage bill that the club has.
Yeah. A few other comments coming in there. You can do that. Says, Jesus, Derek, I'm scunnered. How can we go toe-to-toe with Man U and get beat by Queen's Park? I just can't deal with the roller coaster. You and me both, buddy. Yeah.
It's the key question, you know. It's the key question. Yeah. It doesn't make any sense, but there you go.
Yep. Just on players that weren't playing today, but were playing with other teams over the course of the weekend. Stuart McBride and a few others. He says a team could have been doing with a Scotty Arfield performance today. Fantastic for Scotty. Back up at Falkirk. Scored a hat-trick as well. Scored a goal after a minute as well in their Scottish Cup win over the weekend. So, great to see him doing the biz at Falkirk. And today you'd have seen Rangers being knocked out of the Scottish Cup wasn't the only shock in Britain, with Liverpool being knocked out by Championship strugglers Plymouth Argyle, who had a certain Nico Katic at the back. Jock Blue says Katic was man of the match for Plymouth. It was a stick-on to bring him back. And Stu Banky also says Big Katic was brilliant today. He's better than the centre-backs we have now. Should have got him back. He would have fought every game, not like these chickens, he says. And he name-checked Rangers as well. He was interviewed after the game on ITV. Him and Connor Hazard, the goalkeeper who was previously at Celtic, and says he's a big Rangers man. Katic swore as well, but he was sensational for Plymouth. He was good last weekend as well in his debut against West Brom, and it's a fair shout. I mean, Nico Katic, he's not been made no secret about his love of Rangers. Of course, he wanted out of FC Zurich last month. Johnny, he wanted to return to Ibrox, but Rangers felt that they didn't need him. I would argue, and we've discussed on shows before, they need a dominating centre-half that's good in the air. I thought Nico Katic would have fitted that bill, surely.
Yeah, I think Katic might have been someone that was worth bringing in at this time, Derek. The only thing I would say was, in terms of moving the ball quickly from the back, which gets back to this thing I'm saying about having a manager that's creating a team that is likely to break down this low block. I don't think Katic really did that. He's a guy that takes the ball and immediately looks to give it to the person who's good with the ball. So he's kind of looking to find, if he's you would probably put him in with a ball playing centre half. Like if he's with Propper, he's immediately turning to move that ball to Propper as quickly as possible. Well, Propper's supposed to be a ball playing centre half. Didn't look like it today. You understand my point in general. Katic is not a guy that's going to be whipping passes into the wingers to try and get the play moving quickly. And, you know, that was one of the things I always felt with, for example, Phil Helander, when he played for Rangers, whenever he came into the team, because he had a nice left foot, you always felt like Rangers moved the ball out the back quicker. John Suter's very good at it as well, gets the ball forward. And you need to do that to disrupt the block. If you don't do that, you're going to struggle. And listen, Katic in the air as an aggressive competitor, made for Scottish football. Would I want him as one of my 4 or 5? I think he's the perfect guy to have to bring in when you're going away to Kilmarnock or you're going away to Aberdeen, where it's going to be a fight. I can totally 100%. See that. So I don't think that's a terrible decision. I know he's not young. I know he's not going to be a guy you're ever going to sell on for big bucks.
Could be a replacement for Leon Balogun, Johnny. I'm thinking ahead. That would be a no-brainer for me.
Yeah, look, John Brown, Rangers legend, was never a player Rangers were going to sell for big bucks. He was never going to be a player that was going to win you the Champions League or the Europa League. But what you could rely on is if a game was a fight, that John Brown would take that fight to the opposition in a way that they couldn't handle. And sometimes you need players like that in Scottish football. And, you know, sometimes I hate myself for saying this stuff, Derek, because I'm a football progressive. I like the beautiful game. You know, I grew up watching Rangers in the Advocate era, you know, and seeing this scintillating, sexy European-style football. And that's the kind of stuff I like to see. But I also understand the basics of this country that we live in, and I've been watching the game here for decades, and some things just remain the same. So Nikola Katic is a kind of guy that's got those abilities to come in and give you that, and I don't think enough Rangers players have that John Brown spirit. I don't think we have enough Scots in the team. I think that's still a problem. If you get more Scots in the team, I think you're more likely to have that. And, you know, they'll be the first, those Scottish guys in the dressing room, to be telling everyone, especially the foreign lads, you know, just how bad this is and putting it into context. Now, listen, James Tavernier, to be fair, has been the club long enough to be doing that. And as a captain, he'll be doing that as well. But see if you could take one Rangers player from the past for this team. You know, John Brown's not a bad shout. You know what I mean? I know he's not the best one. You would want Gaza, you would want Haitley, you would want Laudrup, but you know what I mean about missing that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Can Cameron be the next Ian Ferguson? And Ian Ferguson is what Rangers need as well. Someone, a born winner in there. There is nowhere near enough winners.
Cameron's not that type of player, though.
I know.
I mean, that's the thing. Cameron's a neat and tidy number 10.
Players like that anymore, Johnny. And Ian Ferguson. Or a John Brown, if you like, Stuart McCall, guys like that. You don't really get sort of play. I think the game has just moved on. I'm not saying moved on in a good way. I would like it to go back to a more robust physical style where tackles are not outlawed as we see now, where shin pads come back in. I know that the players these days wear almost toothpicks for shin pads. Bring back the sheets of armour they used to have to wear.
Put you right here on the Rangers Review podcast, talking about get everything back to the 90s.
Yeah. DJ says Ian Ferguson would have hit that penalty so hard the keeper would have died if he tried saving it. Yeah, absolutely. That's what we need. More of that sort of characters in the Rangers team. But those were great players, of course. Absolutely spoiled rotten in the 90s. And interestingly, when you mentioned Advocate and the style of football was great on the eye. That being said, never get anywhere near as far in Europe as these modern Rangers teams do, which is quite staggering if you think about it. But there you go. You can't do that, says Joshua and Johnny could manage the team. Joshua for tactics and Johnny to shout at the players. There they go. That's a fair start.
I don't think it would be. I don't think we'd do any better than Philip Clement. Though I think we'd do worse. So that's probably best left to Football Manager or EA Sports, whatever they're calling the new FIFA.
You've been called out here, Johnny, by Colin. Just on Hadji says, so far off, Johnny. Hadji is not a Rangers player in the kingdom of the blind. He is so far off what we need. It's terrible.
Well, listen, I've got to come back to that, Derek.
Yes.
Hadji's got 8 goal contributions in 15 Premiership games. So he's more than one every 2 games. And unfortunately, that makes him one of the most prolific Rangers players of the last wee while in terms of what he's producing. He's only played 1,000 minutes as well, so he's got 8 in just over 1,000 minutes. So for me, Yanis Hadji delivers, and I'm not saying he's brilliant. I'm not saying he's going to take the club to the next level, but in terms of the domestic bread, he's one of the guys that you know will give you something when you need it. And so many of these guys, you know, the Cyril Dessers of this world, you never know what you're going to get. I saw somebody say on Twitter, Cyril Dessers like box chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. To use the old Forrest Gump thing, you know, and he's a 10 1 minute, a 2 the next. And that's going to get managers a sack. You need to have guys who are 7s, 8s, consistent. And that's how you win leagues.
Sasha Papacci's 7 out of 10s. That's what we need.
Yeah, absolutely.
A scattering of real star quality. This sums it up. Massey gets in touch, Derek. I would rather sleep outside naked in minus 40 degrees here in Alberta than watch another Clement game. He is brutal. So, sums up what many are thinking. And it's a real depressing state of affairs at this moment in time. Do you think, this review, I don't know how many weeks we're into this review, Johnny. I can't imagine. Can you imagine the review sort of decision or sort of review being brought forward and some movement being made with regards to the manager? Do you expect the club to come out in one way or the other, whether that's to give the old dreaded vote of confidence, or do you think they'll just remain silent?
I think they've already done that. I think obviously Patrick Stewart came out, I think it was 4 or 5 weeks ago now, and had the big sit down with the media and talked about why they were going to back Philip Clement. And I don't think they'll change off that trajectory. I think they'll probably internally, and I've not spoken to anyone, so I'm completely speculating before anyone gets panicked. But I think they'll say, it's a game where Rangers have had 28 shots on goal. Queen of the South have created one chance. They've scored one goal. They'll say it's a freak game. They'll say, look down south, Plymouth just put out Liverpool. These things can happen in cup football. And we'll continue on and we'll review it at the end of the season. I think that's how they'll see it. They'll try and be cold, calm, composed. But I don't think the Rangers board should just be looking at this one game. I think the Rangers board should be looking at the broader picture since Philip Clement came in.
Yeah.
And ask whether or not, over the period that he's been there, is there any evidence that he builds a team style that's going to deliver a league title? And I think that for me, the answer to that, as I've already said, is no, even though I do think Clement is a good manager. And you can see that by what he's achieved in Belgium, and you can see that by what he's achieved in Europe with the Rangers. But the two things can be right at the same time, that Philip Clement can be a talented manager and he's not right for Rangers. Just like Giovanni van Bronckhorst wasn't a dud just because he didn't do well at Rangers. He won a league title in Feyenoord, which is a difficult thing to do in Holland. And he got Rangers to the Europa League final. And when he played in Europe, you saw the qualities that Giovanni van Bronckhorst had. So, as I said earlier, there's some very, very specific skills that you need as a Rangers manager. The league makes it even more complicated. And that's why I think when the decision has to be made, and it will be made in my view, unless something incredible happens between now and the end of the season, then they'll have to think very, very carefully about who they're bringing in and what kind of skills they're bringing to the table and how they can round that out with a really, really good quality managerial team. One thing I'd certainly suggest that Rangers should do is think about getting a set piece coach, easy for you to say, not for me, into the building at some point, because
in that for ages.
That's just going to be an absolute obvious one, given how many set pieces you get in Scottish football and the opportunities that you're going to potentially get against teams who are very, very rigid in their defensive block.
I think the Europa League last 16, which Rangers will be involved in, first leg takes place March the 6th, the second leg the following week. I would, just guessing here, I think they're giving them that game, which is, a few weeks away. What's the Rangers schedule now in terms of fixtures? I mean, they're all dead rubbers domestically now. I mean, Hearts next week at Tynecastle, St Mirren the following week, and then Rangers go to Rugby Park for a midweek game. That Old Firm game, 16th of March, coming around at the corner as well, which is just after the Europa League last 16. Of the teams that Rangers could face, Johnny, I asked, weirdly, despite today's result, I would fancy Rangers making the quarterfinals, which shows you how bonkers this Rangers team are. But I've just got a hunch that, I may be wrong, but I think that they might just stick with him. He did say in his press conference that he was quizzed Philip Clement whether he would, had he planned any discussions with the board. He says no. Doesn't expect to have any conversations with them at this moment in time, despite the result today. And it's whether they make a move on it. Like you say, there is new figures in there, in Fraser Thornton and, of course, Patrick Stewart, whether they feel that it's time to pull the trigger on the manager or not. Who knows? But at this moment in time, Philip Clement is still the Rangers manager, and that is still the case. There's a point that came in. Blue Bells Are Blue says, thank God for the pause this evening. If I didn't have an avenue to vent, I'd be wall punching, scunnered, and totally embarrassed. Get PC out. There is no defence of him. It's done. Already was. I've not seen many, and let us know in the comments, folks, if you are still backing Philip Clement, if you feel he can turn things around. But he certainly doesn't have much support, it's fair to say, from the comments I'm seeing at this moment in time. Thank you to Sky Ninja, incidentally, for joining us on the Rangers Review Extra channel. It's much appreciated. With dead rubbers now, as I touched on, Johnny, domestically between now and the end of the season, what would you like to see if the managers, even if the manager is changed, is it a time now to start bleeding the youth and giving opportunities to players more so than what they have been doing, I guess?
Well, I mean, what you have to see now is the continued development of the younger players of the club. I mean, towards next season. So I think Bailey Rice, for example, needs more game time. You need to see further adaptations to allow Egaman to play multiple positions, because you might need him in those multiple positions.
Not left wing, please.
Yeah, sorry?
Not left wing, please. I don't want to see that.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I suppose I'm trying to get at, Derek, is you want to feel like you're going into next season with optimism. These guys having continued on an upward trajectory, so that you can eventually get to the stage whereby they're going to come into the team next season having gone through the trials and the travails of this one for a reason, because they're going to perform, and they're going to perform when it counts. What you don't want is a situation where a new coach comes in, they don't respond, and the next 3 or 4 months gets written off as, oh, well, listen, it was just a disaster. We need to put that all to one side. And there's sort of a level of arrested development there. That would be really, really a disastrous waste of this period. You've got these young players. They need to experience games. They need to experience Rangers. And they need to be able to grow so that they can be a realistic part of the team next year. And listen, Rangers are going to have a lot of pressure on them next year. This rebuild that has started this year, this is not a Philip Clement rebuild. This is a rebuild of the club. You know, Niels Coppin's got a huge role in this. Patrick Stewart's got a huge role in this. This can't be manager-led. The club are not doing manager-led rebuilds anymore. They've already said that, Patrick Stewart. So it needs to continue in the same vein of young, potentially sellable assets coming in, better quality of players to replace the ones that have left, and continuing to control the wage bill, and hopefully building, you know, a better, more sensible, more modern Rangers team for the future that can be full of kind of guys that you can sell on and reinvest that money into the team for the future. That's the plan, and they've got to stick with that. But to do that, they have to have a head coach that can get the best out of those players. And look, I think have we had a single person in the comments that's been backing Philip Clement? I know there's a lot of emotion going around, Derek, but listen, if there's anyone out there who's still backing Clement, who still thinks that he should be given a further chance, that it's not all his fault, and that there's a lot of unfairness towards the manager out there, then, you know, let us know, and we'll be happy to put that up there. I don't think it's all Philip Clement's fault, by the way, but I just don't think you can absolve him from responsibility in any way. He shares the responsibility on this with the players. The players, I mean, he doesn't cross the white line, of course, but you can't sack the players. You can sack the manager, though. That's the main thing. So the buck stops with him. Whether the Rangers board make a decision on his future, who knows? But you'll be the first to hear about it with ourselves, folks. So keep your eyes peeled on our social media channels, on YouTube, and also on the website as well. If you want to
don't know if you want to consume more Rangers content, but if you do, we've a lot more videos on the channel. If you want to join the extra channel, you can do. We've got tactics shows on there, press conference reaction videos, although I'm not too sure anyone wants to watch another Phil Clement press conference. We'll do a Q&A, I think, tomorrow afternoon as well. And as I touched on earlier on,
Derek, just one thing. For anyone who's not watched the press conference tonight, I understand that there might be a sense of a little bit too much. It's worth watching. I think some extremely tough questions. One from Josh, obviously from the Rangers Review. I think Stevie obviously asked a very strong series of questions as well. And Davey Edgar from Heart and Hand as well. So it wasn't like that he was the manager wasn't tested or didn't have the thoughts of the fans put to him. He absolutely did. And it was it's a very, very interesting watch. So I would urge anyone who's not watched it, because they think I can't listen to more of this. It's a really robust interview, much more robust than the one that you saw after the game, for example, on Premier Sports.
Yeah, if you prefer to read what he had to say, you can read the full transcript as well, folks, over on the Rangers Review website. But we'll call it a day there. Bumper show, a Rangers Review special, if you like. As I touched on earlier, I was expecting just a chilled out Sunday evening with the good lady, but Rangers decided to do a Rangers, unfortunately. So big thanks to Jonny for joining me on this show, and thank you to you all for tuning in. As ever, is much appreciated. We're back on tomorrow morning. I think Joshua and Chris are joining me. They were at Ibrox this afternoon, so we can join us for that, 9:30. Until then, enjoy what's left of your Sunday evening. Bye for now.